Hello everyone, I'm Sophy Wong, and this is a video I'm making for Miami Maker Faire 2020. It's a virtual Maker Faire this year, but I'm still super excited to be a part of it, and in this video I'm going to share with you some of the things I make and take you through my design process for one of my projects. So let's jump right into it. And I'm calling this presentation Dream Big and Make Stuff because that's really how I work. I like to fall in love with an idea, think of something amazing that I want to have or something that I've always wanted, and figure out whatever I need to make it real. And I'm a designer. My background is in design, so I really enjoy the process of figuring out what that thing is going to be, working out all the details, and just chasing it down till I get to a finished product at the end. So here's some examples of some things that I've made. This is an LED manicure. I make a lot of wearable tech projects. So I love technology and I love to work technology into my builds, whether it's in the final version of the object, like this is an LED manicure, so it's got a microcontroller on there, each nail has an LED on it. That's an example of when I get technology into the project. And sometimes I just use technology in my process. So I do a lot of 3D printing, a lot of laser cutting, and I have a lot of digital workflow in my process. I also took that LED manicure to a little bit of a further step and added some RGB LEDs into it. This RGB LED manicure is also written up as a tutorial on Adafruit. I write a lot of tutorials about the things that I do, so you could make them as well. So this is a wearable Flappy Bird controller hoodie. So I wanted to explore the idea of making a wearable game controller, and I also love making costumes, so I turned this one into a little bit of a costume. But basically you flap your arms, and by flapping like a bird, you are controlling your Flappy Bird in the game. So this is kind of what it looks like when you're playing. It's sort of an immersive way to play Flappy Bird, and it's just a fun, quick project. You can take it as far as you want to go. Like I went pretty far in turning it into a bird hoodie, but it's just a lot of fun, and this is also written up as a tutorial in Hackspace magazine. And this is a project that I'm working on currently. It's behind me in the studio here. This is a 3D printed dress, and so I'm printing the entire garment on mesh fabric. So it's a process where you print the first layer of the 3D print, and then you pause the printer, add the fabric in, and then resume the printer, and the fabric gets kind of sandwiched in the first layers of the print. And so this is a technique that I saw other people doing. The work of David Shorey is really inspirational to me. So I wanted to explore this idea and experiment, and so I'm challenging myself to make an entire dress this way. And it's almost done. It's coming along. I've got a little bit further to go. And this is my spacesuit. So I love making costumes, I love science fiction, and I love thinking about the future. And this is one of my favorite things that I've ever built. So I thought today I would take you through my design process and sort of how I came up with this spacesuit design. Yeah, it's pretty exciting because I really built this just for myself. But I don't have this spacesuit in the studio with me today because I have actually sent it out to someone who's shooting a music video. So this spacesuit is going to be in a music video, and I'm getting some photos back from their shoot right now, and it just looks incredible. And I'm so excited that something that I built just out of my own head is going to be used by this other creative team in this way. So I'm going to show you sort of where this whole idea came from and how I ended up making this. You may have already seen this spacesuit. It was featured on Tested, so I'll post a little video. I'll post a link to that video in the description of this video, so you can check that out. And I also wrote some tutorials to go along with this project. If you're interested in building a helmet like this, I wrote a tutorial about the helmet for Hackspace magazine. It's in my Wearable Tech Projects book, or it's also in one of the issues of Hackspace. And then I wrote a tutorial for Make magazine about how I built the suit portion, specifically the laser cut foam portion of the suit. So you could find that in Make magazine. And now when I say spacesuit, you might be thinking of this. This is kind of what comes to mind when I say spacesuit initially. This is the really iconic NASA spacesuits. So on the left there, you can see the EMU and the MMU. That's the suits that they're using like right now to do EVAs when they do spacewalks outside the International Space Station. And then on the right, you can see the super iconic A7L spacesuit from the Apollo era missions. And that's a really recognizable, iconic spacesuit. So when I say spacesuit, like that might be what you're thinking, but when you look at my spacesuit, you can see I didn't really make that. My spacesuit looks totally different. And that's because my spacesuit's an original design, and as much as I love the Apollo and the current NASA spacesuits, I knew that I wanted to make something a bit different. I wanted to make something more original, something that was my own design. And so I started this project the way I start all my projects, which is with research. And I started looking at the science fiction movies that I love, the sci-fi movies that have the spacesuits in them that I love. So that's Alien. I love the costumes in Alien. 2001: A Space Odyssey is such a huge visual inspiration for me. The Expanse, I love the costumes in The Expanse. Alien Covenant, Battlestar Galactica. So you can see there's really a theme building here visually of what I was attracted to, and it's really the helmet. I loved that cinematic, epic look of someone in their space helmet with the light shining on their face. That is such a cool vision, and that's what I really wanted to build. That's what inspired me to start this project. So having pulled all of that inspiration together, I started looking at these images and kind of breaking them down and seeing what in these images am I actually being drawn to, and what from them can I take and use as strategies and ideas in my project. So in the alien suit, in the alien helmet, you can see there's a lot of texture and relief on the surface of the helmet, and I thought that would be a great strategy for my helmet because it just gives you this depth to the material, and it starts to tell you a little more about the physicality of that world. You can see in the bottom right there, the Alien Covenant helmet has that sort of geometric pattern on the edges of the visor, and I thought that would be a great strategy for playing up the edges on my visor and making it look a little more complex than just being a plastic shield on my face. Obviously, you can also see that all of these helmets have a lot of light in them, and the lights are shining directly onto the faces of the actors, and that is just such a compelling, dramatic, dynamic visual aspect, and I really wanted to have that in my helmet, even though I know that that is not very practical. It is certainly not the way they do it in working space helmets, but I'm not making a working space helmet here. I am making a costume. I am making something that I want to be visually compelling, and that is just a great way to do it. So I really wanted to get the lights into the helmet. So we started with a purchased helmet, and this is just, a $40 helmet that I bought on Amazon. And my goal was to take this plain looking helmet and just transform it, just see how far I could push it away from its original physical form. And I wanted to preserve some things that I really liked. So I liked that sort of egg shape around the head. And then I wanted to mask the things that I didn't like. So I didn't like that kind of wavy area around the neck, so I knew I was going to do a lot to cover that up. And I started to create surface textures and patterns using my laser cutter. So all of the material that I added to this helmet, it's all EVA foam, which is thin foam. It's commonly used in cosplay. It's very light and it's super easy to work with. And I was able to put it in my laser cutter and etch these patterns into it to create the illusion that there's more than one material at play here. So that sort of hex pattern that looks a bit like a filter, I used that in a few areas. And then I also created that parallel line strips, those strips with the parallel lines. I thought that that would be really useful for highlighting certain areas on my helmet in little strips. And then I left some plain flat areas too. But I was really trying to create the illusion of multiple materials through texture. And when you get the paint on, when you get primer and paint on, it starts to actually transform. It's kind of this magical moment. But here's where you can kind of see all those different textures coming into play, and you start to lose the sense that that's all the same thing. And here's a closer look at how I kind of borrowed that geometric pattern from the Alien Covenant helmet and put it on my visor. So the visor of my helmet is blue. Some people ask me how I tinted my visor. So I didn't. The original helmet came with a blue visor, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to change that. So I decided to play up that blue color in my costume, and I actually made it the base color for the whole costume. So I thought, if I commit to blue in a big way in my color palette, then that blue visor will feel intentional. And I had to get the lights in. That was a big goal of mine, was to get the lights in the helmet. So there's some electronics going on in the helmet. And I added some side lighting as well, because I was kind of developing a story around the things that I was adding to my helmet. And I thought, if you are actually a planetary explorer in space, maybe you're on comms with your team, and maybe you would like a visual indicator when you're looking at a group of people to see whose voice is actually coming through the helmet on your comms. So I added some audio reactive lights that shine out the side of the helmet, and when I talk inside my helmet, it flashes on the outside. Had to get those lights shining on my face, so I used some NeoPixel RGB LEDs from Adafruit. And I made some diffusers for those side lights I was telling you about. I made them out of hot glue, and hot glue paints up really well. So on the right, you can see the bare hot glue, and on the left, I've painted it with silver paint and some weathering, and it just looks like this chunk of metal, but light actually will diffuse through it, and it just has this nice sort of diffusion on the outside of the helmet. There it is. This is before it's painted, but it does retain that diffusion property. So I also scavenged a lot of, I scavenged a few things around my house. When you start making costumes and cosplay and props, really you get to a point where nothing is sacred in your house, and you are willing to take something apart if you need a bit of it for your costume. So that's what I did here. Those orange latches made really great tie downs for the sides of my helmet, like fake tie downs. So I just painted them up to match the rest of the pieces going onto the helmet, and it sort of started to build, add more to that material story of like, okay, these look like heavier bronze elements than some of the other pieces on my helmet, and they're really, most of them are just foam or plastic. And, paint really takes things a long way. So I just kept adding things and changing things. And working on the material story until I got something that I liked, and I got to the end. So here's a look at the helmet when it's got some paint on it and the lights are on inside, and you can see those side lights. And really at this point, I put it on my head and I was so happy, and I pretty much immediately realized that I needed to make a spacesuit to go along with the space helmet. So I went back to the beginning, and like I said, I start every project with research. So I went back to the movies that had inspired me to make the helmet, and we started looking at their suits and picking out things that I thought would work for my suit. There's sort of two kinds of suits that I generally see in space movies. There's the kind that looks like a working jumpsuit that has a little more room in the suit, and then like some kind of harnessing on top, or some kind of equipment strapped to your body on top. And then there's the like skin tight bodysuit look, and they both look great on camera, but I thought that for my suit, I wanted it to feel a little more working, like a little more like a working costume. Someone who's maybe not an executive at the space company. This is someone who's actually out there doing work on the surface of the planet. So I went with something that was not quite so sleek as the Prometheus look. I went with something that was a little more like the Martian, a little more room in the suit for mobility, and then these additional more rigid elements sort of strapped on top. And I really looked in depth at these costumes. Some of them have so much detail. The Martian has so much stuff on it, and I didn't want to get quite that complex, so I limited myself to a few elements. The Star Trek First Contact suits are really iconic as well, and they're pretty plain compared to how many bits and bobs are going on the Martian. First Contact is pretty minimal, and I kind of really like that. Armageddon, I just love the texturing going on. They're kind of like way over the top, but having all those little bits and bobs and those little ridges, I think look great. So I wanted to get some of that kind of texturing detail in. And the costumes, the spacesuit from Sunshine is a totally wacky and amazing suit. If you haven't seen Sunshine, I highly recommend it. It's kind of an underrated sci-fi movie, and it has this crazy gold spacesuit, and I love this thing. So I definitely took some inspiration from here. And once I'd identified what I liked out of my inspiration, I started sketching ideas, taking things from different places and kind of synthesizing it all together, and just following the same process that I did for my helmet. And I just started to like expand the ideas that I generated from my helmet into the suit. So the suit is made, the jumpsuit is made out of satin. It has that kind of like, it's polyester satin, so ordinarily I hate sewing with that, but it has this really synthetic look, and I thought that was perfect for a spacesuit. And then the foam I patterned off of my body so that it would fit me properly, and used the laser cutter to cut all the pieces the same way I did the helmet, so it would feel sort of family, like maybe it was made at the same time or in the same factory. Here's a look at some of the laser cut pieces before I glue the seams together, and here's how it looks when it's kind of folded together and wrapped around a body. And I just kept adding more and more layers of foam and cutting them out on my laser cutter and making the details really crisp, and building up layers and trying to get more dimension into the piece so that it wouldn't feel like it was all made out of flat layers. And I discovered that I could hide the seams of my pieces in the surface design itself. So I think this is really the best example of that. These are the shoulder pieces, and I was able to completely hide that center seam by just radiating the surface pattern out from it. And once it's put together, it just looks like part of the graphic. Did a lot of priming and a little bit of sanding. And once I got the gray primer on, I was like, yeah, I think this is gonna work. And this is where you can really see the patterns kind of coming together and the way I distributed the different surface designs that I created. Paint, again, just takes it that final mile, a little bit of weathering, and once I put it all together, I had this moment of like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like this actually come together. It actually all kind of fits together. So I got to have my cinematic moment. I went and did a photo shoot, and I walked around, and it just felt great to put the suit on after having done all of that work. And I have a little fan on the back of the suit that blows air into my helmet so that it doesn't fog over. And of course, I left some of those vents open on the side and on the front of the helmet because this is just a costume. So obviously you wouldn't have vents in your helmet in space, but I need to stay alive in this costume on Earth, and it's really hot at some conventions. So I made the choice to leave those vents open so that I could get some fresh air in the helmet, and it really cuts down on the fogging. I had to get some lights into the chest piece as well, and this was kind of a direct inspiration from Armageddon. It also kind of looks a bit Darth Vader-y, which I like. And then, you know, there's another found object, that like valve thing on the shoulder portion. I don't even know where that came from, but it was in my stash of random bits and bobs, and I thought it would look great there. And there's a closer look at the back panel. It's sort of a backpack area. And when I was doing the weathering, I was trying to think of the story of this person. Like, what areas of this costume, of this uniform, are going to get exposed to the elements? Where is there going to be wear and tear on it? And I thought, well, I kind of created this story about the person, that maybe she's an explorer, and maybe if she's doing planetary exploration, she has to ride a shuttle down from her ship, from orbit, down to the surface. And if she's sitting in the shuttle in her suit, then there will be some wear as she's, you know, coming through the atmosphere of the planet. Maybe she gets a lot of vibrations. Maybe there's a lot of rubbing and distressing that goes on the back side of the costume. So I was kind of thinking of that sort of experience for her while I was doing the weathering, and that was helping me decide where to place the marks. And yeah, I got to have my cinematic dream come true. And as I said, I sent this suit out, and it's actually going to be in a production. So I'm really excited about that. And it's just, you know, an example of building the thing that you want and following it to the end, and just letting yourself dream really big and do whatever it takes to get to the end of it. I definitely hit a lot of roadblocks here and there. I had to make a lot of decisions. I had big ideas. Some ideas I had to let go of. Some ideas made it all the way to the end, and they're in the finished piece. And of course, I have more ideas and things I want to add to it. But that's how I made my spacesuit. That's a pretty good example of how I make all of my projects. In some way or another, I follow that formula, from research to sketching and prototyping to jumping in and figuring it out as I go. And so I hope that you enjoyed that little walkthrough, and I am looking forward to hearing what you think and answering any questions that you might have in the live portion of this presentation. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.